Welcome to A Victim Bites Back, episode 37. It's interesting that here in the south of France, which normally is absolutely packed throughout both July and August, almost nobody is here at the moment. So actually it's rather good because I could have the pool entirely to myself. But it is interesting. I suspect that probably what will happen is everybody will arrive here during August, where the rest of the France and also most of Italy and Germany closes down, except for the seaside resorts. Anyway, for the moment, it's lovely here. They say it's a heat wave. I don't know about heat waves. We've got air conditioning and we've got swimming pools. Who needs heat waves? I suppose that's just one of the effects of Brexit, fewer exports from Britain to the EU. This is A Victim Bites Back. I'm Jonathan King and I'm trying to show you some travel information at the moment the south of France, although this is an Italian restaurant in the south of France, but also travelling all over the world. I've been in Morocco, in Spain, and I'm going to be in Switzerland, in Germany, and all sorts of other places. I do hope you enjoy it, plus my occasional slightly outrageous or controversial opinions on various things going on in the world, but particularly going on in the UK. I think one of the most shocking things ever in the awful history of British justice, and I use the word in inverted commas, is the IPP situation. That stands for something like imprisonment for public protection. IPP. It was brought in, I think, by the awful Labour government of Tony Blair in the early 2000s and it then got repealed quite rightly because it was absurd. Rather like that awful joint enterprise thing, where if somebody happened to be in a group with loads of others and they got into a fight, even if he tried or she tried to stop a person from hitting someone, they were sent to prison under joint enterprise legislation for being in the gang and not managing to stop the violence. Well, the IPP thing is even worse. The IPP thing, there are thousands of prisoners in British jails at the moment who were sent to jail sometimes for less than 2 years for a trivial crime. You know, like perhaps picking up a wallet from the street and keeping it. Yes, it's a crime. Yes, they should actually be punished. But no, not with an IPP that ends up being life imprisonment for something so absurd and so tiny that it's shocking. After it was repealed, you would think that all the people who were locked up for IPP forever in perpetuity, or until a parole board decides that they can be let out, would have been let out. No such way. There are still hundreds of them serving years. I think over 600 are still locked up in prison, having served something like 10 years for a sentence that was initially under 2 years. This is absurd. But the awful thing is, nobody cares. Nobody in the public cares. Nobody in the media cares. Nobody in Parliament and government cares. Nobody in the justice system cares. Only a few people, the families and loved ones of the people who are still in prison 10 years later for stealing a purse or something years ago, they care. Well, I have to tell you, I fucking care.
You never got to be a star. You didn't give up so easy. You still got playing the game. You found yourself a man for a small percentage, and he gave you a different name. Oh, Bobby Dazzler, what they trying to do to you? They tell you what to wear and how to comb your hair, and everything else you do. Oh, Bobby Dazzler, how they really let you down. You got nothing left to sing when they stood you in the ring, painted you like a clown. Bobby Dazzler, sha-la-la-la-la. Bobby Dazzler, sha-la-la-la-la. Bobby Dazzler, hey, hey, you wore a pair of faded denims around about 69. Your very last chance to be in the circus is here for the very last time. Oh, Bobby Dazzler, what they trying to do to you? They tell you what to wear and how to comb your hair and everything else you do. Oh, Bobby Dazzler, how they really let you down. You got nothing left to sing when they stood you in the ring and painted you like a clown. Bobby Dazzler, sha-la-la-la-la. Bobby Dazzler, sha-la-la-la-la. Bobby Dazzler.
Now look here, son. You do exactly as I say,
I can see a very bright future for you.
Well, you're the boss. Where do I sign?
Sign just here. And don't forget the copy.
I actually do a lot of my writing here. It's sort of my second office in the south of France. Sadly, my writing isn't nearly as good as F. Scott Fitzgerald. I love that Bobby Dazzler song. I think it should have been huge. But what can you do? Time moves on. Another problem with the screwed up British justice system is the CCRC, Criminal Case Review Commission. Now, they're meant to be an independent body who look at convictions and decide whether or not to send them back to the Court of Appeal to have them quashed. And a mere 1%, sometimes as much as 2%, of people who appeal to them are sent back. This is crazy. Nobody in their right mind thinks that 98% of the convictions are valid and genuine. And so all those people who were innocent get their appeals rejected. Now, why is that? Most people say because the CCRC hasn't got the funding to properly investigate the appeals, and that is part of it. But the main part is they shouldn't be doing the deciding on whether something is or is not of sufficient merit to be examined by judges and jurors. That's what ought to happen. They should actually look at what they call the test, the likelihood test, the real possibility test. They look at it and they decide whether or not there's a real possibility that the Court of Appeal would actually quash the conviction. Now, they're not in a position and they don't have the investigative powers to make that decision. They can look at something such as whether or not the police have disclosed a vital piece of evidence, and they can decide whether or not the jury would have been swayed by that vital piece of evidence. Bollocks. Sorry, they cannot know and they cannot judge. It can only be a judge or a jury who can make that decision. It's absolutely disgraceful that the CCRC has usurped the job of judges and juries. It cannot go on. Somebody has to stop it now. Another of my favourite places in the south of France is the Eden Rock Hotel, where I go many times to write, but also to swim and to eat. It's gorgeous there. Take a look. Back in England, as we've seen a series on the BBC called The Sixth Commandment. It has been absolutely wonderful, partly because of the incredible work of Timothy Spall, who is one of my guilty pleasures great actors of our time, and likewise Anne Reid. They play Peter and Anne, who are ripped off and eventually murdered by this awful man called Ben Field. The series, which is a 4-parter, is absolutely magnificent. Everything about it is brilliant. The script is great. The direction is great. There's some wonderful camera work. Everything is terrific. It's a horrific story, and one of the great things that comes out of it is sometimes good police can be marvellous. I remember Colin Sutton, who brought Levi Belfield, the killer of Millie Dowler, to justice, is an idol of mine because he was so terrific as a police officer, and the police officers in the Sixth Commandment are terrific as well. But interestingly enough, looking back at Colin Sutton and the Millie Dowler case, his one huge criticism of the police was of Surrey Police and of the man in charge of the Surrey Police investigation into the murder of Millie Dowler, who actually features in the very good TV show about the case, and is the man who was responsible for my prosecution of Surrey Police, my wrongful conviction in 2001. Interestingly enough, in the Sixth Commandment we also see two people who were involved in my case or appeals as well. The judge, Justice Nigel Sweeney, in the Sixth Commandment case, was actually one of my barristers during one of my appeals, as was David Jeremy. David Jeremy was the prosecutor barrister in my trial in 2001. He was the defence barrister for the ghastly Ben Field in the Sixth Commandment. My jaw was dropping as I watched this. If you haven't seen it, do catch it on iPlayer. It's an absolutely fabulous series. Lunch, and one of my favourite things are crevice gris, which are sort of grey shrimps. I think we call them brown shrimps in England. I used to love them when they were potted by Young's with butter, but actually they're still delicious, and they're the cheapest by far of all the shellfish. I love them. It's always interesting going around the markets and seeing all the fresh foods in all the French establishments and towns. I love doing that. But to get back to the topic of politics and morality in Great Britain, by-elections have just come forward with the usual typical results. The party that's not in power always tends to win. You know, it doesn't mean anything. But I do look at it. I really can't stand Keir Starmer. The main reason for that, of course, is because when he was DPP, Director of Public Prosecutions, he brought in the victims will be believed police structure, which meant that any victim that made any claim of a sexual nature, going back sometimes dozens of years, must be believed by the police. Now, this is absurd. They mustn't be believed or disbelieved. They must be investigated. And surely, if they're telling the truth, investigation must proceed, and whoever they're accusing must then be prosecuted and face a trial. If, on the other hand, it's discovered that they're lying, or they're deluded, or they're mentally upset, or they're drugged or drunk and didn't actually know what happened, as in many rape cases, then the police should say, look, we're terribly sorry, we're dismissing this. There's not enough evidence for it. And if you've done it maliciously or deliberately, for example, to make lots of money, or as they call it, compensation, they should then be prosecuted themselves. But no, Keir Starmer simply sees the one way through, which is a victim must be believed. A victim in inverted commas. Basically, a complainant must be believed. That to me is insane. Anyway, a few months ago I made a suggestion to all the false allegations firm companies that are desperately trying to squash the false allegations industry. We really should do something about false allegations, and I suggested that we should target a dozen of the top people, the heads of all three major political parties, editors of major newspapers, a couple of major judges, all sorts of very important people, and discover the skeletons in their closets. They would obviously have to be true, but if people actually did say they'd been raped or assaulted or abused, even if it was 30, 40 years ago when the people were teenagers, whether they were male or female, I think whichever way you look at it, they should all be briefed on what to do, and they should all put their complaint into the police on the same day, and it should be announced to the media, because then all the people who are being accused should certainly be questioned, as for example Cliff Richard was, or even arrested and questioned, as for example Paul Gambaccini was, and they should actually all then get the publicity that those people got, front pages of all the newspapers, because then we would see that this is going really crazy, the false allegations industry. Even if these allegations, and by the way, we should make certain, were true. I think it's still ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous. Well, my suggestion was completely turned down by everybody who said, no, we're then doing what they're doing, we're as bad as they are. And I agreed, because I didn't really want to get into that myself, and I thought it was not a nice thing, but on the other hand, it might be the only thing that's necessary to stop people doing what's now happened to, for example, Philip Schofield, Hugh Edwards, the Wootton man, Dan Wootton. Anyway, they rejected it and they said no. But I think these days, somebody is going to do that to say Keir Starmer. I bet you there are people working for the Conservatives at this very moment to find a couple of skeletons in Keir Starmer's cupboard that will come out, make official complaints, and then they will see Keir Starmer removed from the Labour Party before the next general election. Mind you, I think they'd be shooting themselves in the foot, because the Labour Party might then choose somebody much better, and I think almost anybody will be better, to lead them. I quite like the look of that Wes Sweeting person. A lot of people rather like Andy Burnham, Mayor of Manchester. I don't really like him. He strikes me as very much a public relations person, but who can tell? Anyway, we shall see what will happen. Yeah, whether it's the Grim Reaper or the false allegations industry or bent lawyers, they get us in the end. See you next week for A Victim Bites Back, episode 38.